How's it going? Yeah, I haven't done anything yet, but thanks for the vote of confidence. I appreciate that. So welcome. We're gonna have some panelists up front here, but let me give you a little bit of background on kind of what's going on today. So you said, Frank, my name's Frank Soqui. Pronounce it Soqui like okie dokie. If you ever see it spelled, sometimes that confuses you. Yes, I am the general manager for virtual reality and gaming at Intel. But you know what's really exciting is in the virtual reality spaces over the last few years, especially in applications and in usage scenarios with virtual reality, we get this rapidly emerging sort of focus around gaming and around entertainment. And the reason that we're seeing that happen is because, I'm going to use the word paradigm. It's a paradigm shift, new usages. You're seeing that happen because this kind of compute is fundamentally changing the way people are going to work together, the way people are going to play, the way we're going to communicate and interact with each other. I fundamentally believe that, and you'll see part of why I believe that when we talk to the panel today. The other thing is Intel platforms today because of Intel platforms, you get the best, most immersive experience in VR than you can get anywhere on any platform today. And that's why I'm both professionally and personally excited to be hosting the panel. We're going to have leaders from studio side and the hardware side come up and tell you about what the challenges are that are going on in virtual reality and kind of where they see things going in virtual reality. So before I begin, let me invite the panel up. I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves one by one. No particular order. Kevin? Kevin, I called you out. Sorry, bud. Right, introduce yourself.
Oh, these work. Hi, everyone. My name is not Kevin, Frank. It's Keith Kaisershot. I'm a self-described VR evangel engineer at Other Ocean. That's a title I made up for myself. Basically means I'm a programmer day to day, but I'm also my studio's biggest VR cheerleader. And I work on a game called Giant Cop. I'm a programmer on that game, and I'm just really happy to be here and really happy to be working in VR games. So.
Very cool. Thanks. Anna? Anna, did I get your name right? Yes. Awesome.
Hello. I'm Anna Sweet, and I'm head of developer strategy at Oculus. And so what that means is I get the super fun job of working with all the amazing developers around the world who are building VR content and helping them take their ideas from concept to something that ships on our platform.
Right, cool. Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson. I'm a virtual reality engineer at Funomena, and I'm working on a game called Luna, which is a creative musical puzzle game, and we're dealing with a lot of the challenges in building interesting UX and interactions in VR.
Right, and Theresa.
Hello. I'm Theresa Duringer, co-founder at Temple Gates Games, and we are working on social games. We just released Ascension VR, which is a board game in virtual reality.
All right, cool. So I got some questions I'm going to ask them. I've asked them to try to be honest and give you their personal insight of what's going on based on the questions. I do want to also be able to go to the audience later on and ask some questions near the end. So this is the time to start formulating those really hard questions. When asking you raise your hand, I want some tough questions because there's nothing more interesting than a tough question and a really awesome answer. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, so first one off the top of the bat. I'm going to actually focus on Keith and Theresa. I'll bracket the ends here. I'm a technologist. I love technology. There's a truckload of technology going on in the VR space today, from the CPU side of things, or the graphics, or storage, or memory, or whether you're talking about I/O like Thunderbolt and wired connectivity or wireless connectivity and WiGig. On top of all the SDKs you got to pay attention to as a developer on the operating systems and the multitude of HMDs, the head-mounted displays coming out there. Tons of technology. There's no way we're going to cover them all today. But what I would like to ask you is that, what is the biggest technology challenge? I mean, and I gave you a list. You can even go beyond that. What is the biggest technology challenge that you think we have in VR today, and what do you think we should do about it?
Well, Frank, we talked a little bit about this before the panel started. I think Intel has tackled this. They announced it today, and I didn't even know about this until today. But my big ticket item would be wireless HDMI or wireless video. Because I mean, there's mobile VR, and mobile VR is great. I mean, you can use your phone for VR, and the Gear VR and the Google Cardboard is awesome technology, but mobile VR has got its own set of problems. I mean, if you're doing everything on the phone, you're doing everything embedded, then you've got obviously the heat issue. You know, you can only play for about an hour or two before either your phone overheats or maybe your battery runs out or something like that. Whereas on the PC, you don't have those problems. Plus, you've got an entire world of power that you can harness on the PC there. But the problem with the PC is that you're still tethered with most of the headsets out there. The Vive and the Oculus are still both tethered headsets. And if we can solve that problem by, still doing all the processing on the PC and all the video work there, but pushing that over wirelessly to the headset, then, you open up an entire realm of space to play with that you have on the mobile space, like swivel chair gaming. It's something that's really easy on mobile because you don't have something that's going to wrap around your neck and choke you. So if we can solve that on PC, then that would be huge.
Yeah, I've actually seen that in some of the YouTube videos where you got your buddies sort of managing the cable for you a little bit, so you can get too tangled up. The other thing I heard is that people get sort of a little distracted because they feel the cable near them. And we're trying to suspend disbelief with virtual reality, make you feel like you're there, and then you feel this cable dragging.
That's absolutely true. Like I've done a couple of conventions where I've done some VR demos, and you have to have a couple people doing this. You've got the one person in the demo, and the other person kind of chaperoning you and holding the cable, making sure that you don't trip on it or that it doesn't get you entangled or things. There are some home setups that you can do, like a slip ring where you could have the cables coming in from above, or you can do like me and just have a mic stand or something, just run the cable through that, and that's a poor man's slip ring. But that's not really something that's very attractive or something that's really viable long term. So
I think your audience tends to enjoy that sort of activity, though. They're like cracking up when you get wrapped around it.
Yeah.
All right, Theresa. So biggest technology challenge, and what the heck do you think we should be doing about it?
Well, I agree with Keith.
Keith.
I agree with Keith about the tethering issue. It's definitely a big one. And I'm also seeing limitations with processing power. So if you're doing any kind of cross-platform VR development, you're probably running into issues where your GPU is constraining your design. You're going to have limited draw calls. If you caught the last talk, it looked like they were tackling that a little bit. But also, if you're doing PC VR development, you might also be running into limitations as far as CPU. So some of the areas that we have run into that are, like, my design background comes from working on things like SimCity and where we had lots of simulated agents, and Spore, where we had these procedural generation and lots of animations without knowing what the game objects were to me. Like, I'm seeing issues with simulation in VR. So in VR, you can be drawing your field of pixels in front of the player, but you don't know at any time your player might turn around and look behind themselves. So you have to always be ready to draw something behind them. If you are worried about performance, you might be doing some kind of frustum culling to reduce the amount of things that you're drawing on screen, but you have to have things preloaded so that you can always be ready to draw things behind your player. And also you have to be running simulations if there are game objects, so that when they turn around, that object is ready to interact with. Also, I'm seeing issues with animation taxing the CPU. So in our games, you have a multiplayer experience where your player avatar is moving in a way that is really dictated by the player's real movements in the real world. So we are blending information coming from the accelerometer and positional tracking with canned animations, because if you use basically just use accelerometer only, you're going to have a static body to your player. So these are a couple areas I'm seeing a lot of issues with taxing the CPU.
Yeah, on the physics, I absolutely agree on the physics side. If you're going to try to trick someone that they're actually in a virtual reality environment, the more and more that the real world, it can look like a real world sort of interactivity. And I don't think just on the avatar and the character side, That has to do with explosions, interaction with all the other objects around you. And that's a very physics-heavy type CPU calculation. So absolutely agree with that observation. I hadn't quite thought about it that way before. Well, that's good. Thank you. I'm going to stick to 2 people per question, so I'm going to actually shift the question a little bit. This is going to be a little bit more to the business side of things. So in addition to all the technology challenges that are going to be apparent in VR, and we're knocking them out, there's a host of business model challenges or challenges relating to how to create end user value, how to create end user awareness, conversations about price, about availability, compelling content. Nothing to do with technology, just getting the adoption and the business models out there and giving people actually what they want. So basically the question is, in these kind of areas or even areas outside of technology, what are the top areas that you think need the most attention? And it comes back down again, and what do you think the industry should be doing about it? So let me start with Scott Anderson.
Yeah, so VR is a really, really interesting market right now because there's lots of hype and lots of interest in it, but it's not very large yet, which makes it a great place for indie developers to be and a not so great place for indie developers to be at the same time. As far as market awareness goes, and getting more people into VR headsets, aware of VR headsets, buying VR headsets, part of it is because it's a kind of a new category of device entirely. So some of it is just people aren't familiar with it. A lot of people haven't tried headsets yet. So getting them in stores obviously has helped. Having them at big conventions like PAX will help. The interesting thing about it being a small market is it's kind of a chicken and egg problem where there's not as much software because it's early on and it's a small market, but what's going to get people into headsets is software. So many of the platform holders such as Oculus, et cetera, have done a good job of investing and funding content so far, but we definitely need more content, and some of that's just going to be time to get there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying on the content side. I've seen some companies start from the angle of, I'm going to take my existing title and just convert it. And I've seen some struggles with that. I think grounds up, as painful as that can be, I think grounds up is probably the way to go because this is a whole completely new experience.
Yeah, there's really a small set of titles that where you can do that. But I'd say for the majority of games out there, it doesn't work either from a design standpoint or from a technical standpoint because of performance constraints. And really, a lot of the most compelling VR happens when you have tracked controllers, and that's something you have to design from the ground up because it's an entirely new control scheme.
Yeah, and then I also appreciate what you said about that experience. I mean, you really don't know what VR is like. You think you know what it's like until you actually try some good VR. The analogy for me on the PC side was, for the longest time we had SSDs, right? We wanted to put SSDs in notebook type designs, and it was crazy expensive. Nobody wanted to go pay for it, and even the enterprises was like, hey, it's too expensive. But as soon as you turn on a notebook with an SSD in it, you could not live without it. And I feel like that's sort of starting to be the same experience with VR. It's like as soon as you have a really good VR experience, like, holy moly, what am I going to do about this? My son Nathaniel's already dedicated his living room to VR. So he's decided that that's how he's going to live that experience and commit to it. All right, so I want Keith to also talk about more on the business side of things, in addition to the technology pieces. What's going on in your mind in terms of either the biggest business challenges, usage, price, content, and then what do you think we should be doing about it?
Well, I don't know if I'm the one to answer that question because, again, I'm a programmer. I don't really participate in those conversations. But if it were up to me, I mean, the thing to figure out is really the kind of content that is going to get people to come back to VR. Because I mean, we're in kind of a situation now where Theresa actually did talk about this at GDC this year, where VR is like in its GeoCities phase right now. Where I mean, you've got a lot of businesses looking into VR, trying to dip their toe into it, but a lot of these things are just glorified commercials, basically, kind of 30-second, 1-minute snippets just saying, hey, look, guys, we're in VR, it's hip, it's cool, look at us, buy our product. But, that's not really what's going to get people to invest in the technology. We need something that gets people to come back, something with In the game space, we call this replay value, right? And that's something that is probably just going to kind of evolve, naturally, as did the early web days. But I don't know how to solve that problem from a business perspective. You put together a team, you can solve that from a content perspective, but as far as the marketing goes, I don't know, I could probably, Anna or Scott can maybe speak better to that, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I think marketing is really interesting in VR because everything we've done before to showcase our content, we kind of have to throw away, right? Like the way we do screenshots and the way we do trailers, they just don't, they don't represent like a 360 immersive world. And so we have to kind of invent new ways to get someone who might be looking at something on a 2D screen to imagine what it would be like to actually be in that world. At Oculus, we're doing a lot of experiments with trailers where we're really showcasing like people looking around or people like throwing something from hand to hand, like trying to find those moments that are truly a VR experience and not an experience you can have with a controller on a PC or on a console, and really showcasing those. But it's gonna be a really interesting challenge. We're really gonna have to kind of go back to the drawing board on how we market our content and our experiences.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what I'd said a little bit earlier is I think it's a false assumption to think you can take what you already have and just kind of move it towards VR. I don't think that's going to be the experience at all. You actually, this is a nice segue into the next one, and I wanted to ask you more technology and kind of business issues aside. It feels, what I was saying earlier, I felt like VR has the ability to go transform almost every experience related to compute and the experiences people want to have with compute. I would liken it to something, the way touch transformed every screen. I think you can walk into any area, whether it's a mall, somebody's home, pick up somebody's phone, and the first thing you do is people touch the screen, and if it's not touch enabled, people are like, it's broken, right? I have a feeling that VR's kind of got that potential. So given that kind of landscape, kind of transformational things going on in VR, what do you think VR is headed in this next 3 to 4 years? And what do you think needs to be done for getting ready for where it's headed? That's for you, Anna.
Sure, so I agree. I think VR is incredibly exciting. I struggle to think of an industry that can't be transformed in some way by VR. Like personally, I'm really excited about what we're going to do in education, in travel, in productivity. Like there's just so many areas to explore. I think the challenge for me that I think we all have to think about is the skills that you need to build anything in VR, no matter what it is, are currently contained within the people that we call game developers. Like their engineering abilities, their design abilities, their creative problem solving, like that is the skill set you need to build VR. And we as a broader VR industry have to figure out what we're gonna do to convince them to build things that aren't just games. Like we need them through the whole industry. And in fact, we need to find a way to attract a whole new generation of game developers because VR is gonna be huge and there's just all these things to solve and all these amazing things to build and explore. And we just need game developers to do that. And so I think as an industry, we need to take a step back and think, how do we get these amazing people to use their talents in other areas as well?
If I can piggyback off of that for a second, I liken it to when 3D accelerator cards were coming out in the mid-90s. At first it was all about gaming, and that's what the application was. And right now, I think over the next 3 or 4 years, I think the primary driver of VR technology is going to be gaming. A lot of the game developers are going to be putting together the content that really kind of defines what a VR experience is. The VR user experience, the UI and things. These are going to happen through a lot of the indie space, and a lot of even the big names in gaming are going to have to figure these things out. And in the context of games, you can give games a pass for getting things wrong. Trying things out. Oh, it doesn't work. Well, it's a game. Who cares? But over the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to figure these things out, and then over time, we're going to kind of have a defined language for VR in much the same way as other mediums have, like movies or things like that. So I think the game developers are going to be the primary drivers of the technology, and over time, we're going to see it branch out into heavy industry and medical, and they're going to adopt a lot of the same paradigms that we establish here.
I think you're seeing the beginning of that already. Theresa, same sort of question though, from your perspective, where do you think VR is headed in the next 2 to 3 years, and how do you see us kind of getting ready for that?
I think in all of the disciplines that Anna mentioned, VR does have the power to transform them, and the biggest way I see that happening is through a social experience. So when people are using their computers right now, it's largely a solitary experience. You're browsing the web, you're checking your email, you're working on your documents. And there are transcendent experiences, like, you know, you can get together with your friends for playing some WoW or going on Twitch for social experience. But in VR, it's really different. So in VR, you can see someone that you're in a space with across from you. You can see them talking to you. You can really be with them. I can go hang out with my sister who lives across the country from me in South Carolina, and I'm in San Francisco, and we can really be there together, chatting about our day, playing a game together, as if we're in the same space. So there are technology limitations in VR that I'm seeing us push on. So one thing that we really need to get better at is voice. So right now in VR, if you have an experience that's going to draw a crowd of 1,000, let's say you have a concert in VR, you're really going to have to partition the multiplayer lobbies or rooms down, because we can't right now, processing power-wise, blend, encode, transmit, and decode all of that voice information together. So we're really dampening the impact of what we could see in VR socially by dividing out people into these micro lobbies. Another thing that I think is really going to transform this is getting representative avatars. So if you've tried any VR experiences that are social, a lot of them, including our own work, has sometimes some kind of kludgy avatars that are maybe based on fantasy or, you know, have some limited customization. But I think what's going to be really transformative is when we can have avatars that really look like ourselves. We have the technology for that right now. You can kind of go out to, you know, even here probably they have it. You can go on a Lazy Susan sort of device that will spin you around, and there will be a camera that has depth information sensing and can generate an OBJ file based on just scanning your body, but that's not available at scale right now. So I think in the next few years, what we're probably going to see is someone coming up with a system where you can just submit, here's a few photos of me, generate an avatar, and we'll all in 10 years' time have a 3D avatar that's available for use. And the last thing that I really want to see complementing the social experience is right now in our VR games, I'm getting matched up with people from across the world, and I might not be able to understand the language that they're speaking. So just like you have applications like WordLens that do real-time translation of text, you know, using a camera, I'd really like to see some real-time or pseudo-real-time translation of voice, so that we can really be having that global experience with people from around the world together in one space.
You know, there's something that I really like about your answer. It's all the constituent elements you were talking about that needed to get done have in one form or another sort of existed as sort of like separate, isolated applications. And you're really describing something that brings all those to bear in an experience. The other thing I'm personally a fan of is the social aspects of it. But I'll be really specific. I actually imagine we're going to see something on the social aspects where people who are not normally going to be available to go travel, or maybe they have problems with crowds, or they're not able to get out because of a physical disability or desire. This is going to invite a lot more people to go, be able to connect and game or have an experience together they weren't normally able to have. I mean,
yeah.
I'm really a fan of that.
VR offers access. It's like personal teleportation.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I really like that answer. All right, let me get down to the transformation. We've been talking about it's going to transform experiences. So arguably, we're still at the very, very beginning of virtual reality transforming a ton of experiences. But I'm going to ask almost like a time question here. As your company's kind of leaped into VR, what would you have changed that has not happened today? I mean, if you could rewind the clock and say, wow, I mean, I know we're at the very front of this, Frank, but if I could go back 1 or 2 years, this is what I would change, because I think we'd have been in a very different space today. So let me start with Anna on that one.
So actually, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what we were just talking about, which is the social aspect. Like, I can't say enough about how powerful social is in VR and how surprising it is. So we built this experience called our Toy Box demo, which was to showcase our touch controllers. Like, it's actually not that exciting of a demo. You're in this room and you're with someone else and you're picking up blocks and toy guns, and you're just this generic head and set of hands. And it was a great demo for our touch controllers, but the thing that actually shocked us and surprised us was how transformative being in that room with someone else was. And we have this story from our conference, Oculus Connect, last year, where we were showing off this demo, and we had 2 people go into the room. They came in from different directions. They never saw each other in real life. They spent about 10 minutes in this toy box demo. They left. Again, they never saw each other. And we had 2 developers who actually told us later that when they got to the bar that night, they were able to find that other person. Because it turns out there's just so much humanity in like the way you move and the way you interact with the world that you're actually able to truly get to know someone and actually feel like you've met them in real life, even though in this case they were literally 2 identical generic blue heads and hands. So to me, that's just super powerful, and I think we were all surprised by how compelling and immersive that experience was, and how it's really truly something that can only happen in VR. And so for me, it's social all the way. Like I would just go.
So the thing you would have changed is jump all the way into social first.
Super early in social, and really sort of push that and see what we can learn and what we can do. And the amazing thing about social is it applies to every vertical of content, like travel, education, all of those things is better and more immersive and more entertaining and meaningful if you're there with someone else. So for me, it's social all the way.
Right. Hey, Scott, some question for you. So as you kind of jumped into the VR space, we start having a lot of key learnings, a lot of observations, what's going around in the rest of the ecosystem, the rest of the environment, the rest of the applications and workloads. What would you have changed that you have not seen happen today? What would you have tried to change earlier on?
Yeah, actually I have 2 kind of sides and answers to this question. One is a technical one, and with the announcement of Project Alloy this morning, it changed my answer a little bit because Intel is actually doing this now. But Vive has a front-facing camera, but it's not a stereo camera and it's not a depth sensing camera. So having that hardware in the HMDs and being able to do even a limited form of inside-out tracking, I think enables a lot of interesting applications. It may not be super useful for gaming, but most of the AR devices, like HoloLens, for example, have similar capabilities. So to see it in a VR device is interesting too, and that's something that a lot of the earlier devices didn't have.
So you're saying we should have started that earlier?
Yeah, yeah. I would like to see it earlier.
Right.
Just because it unlocks a lot of interesting things definitely from an application
Yeah,
standpoint.
I won't say that's cool just because I'm at Intel, but it's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. No.
And you had a second one, right?
And the second one is from more of the marketing side and the biz dev side. And I'm in a room, and a panel full of game developers and a room full of game developers. So it's good that the platform holders and the game engine creators and stuff focused on game development first, just from a job standpoint for me. But part of me, from looking at it from a consumer standpoint, I think it'd be interesting if the industry started out focused on content creation applications first, because many of the most compelling applications like Tilt Brush and Medium are content creation. And you can imagine if you had better tools in VR, then it would be easier later on the line to build better games for VR.
All right, cool. Anyone else on the panel? Because I'm gonna shift to the audience, and if the audience does have any questions, I got a few more I can ask. Anybody else?
I was just gonna say, I wish I had gotten the team on board sooner with VR. Just
on board, you mean like formed? And
yeah, just like full speed ahead with VR tech. It's like Scott was saying earlier. It's a chicken and egg problem. I mean, there's a year ago the CV1 hadn't shipped, and there was, Vive dev kits were out there, and the installed base of VR just wasn't very big. And so how do you make a business case to a studio leader that says we need to make games for this VR thing that nobody owns yet? That's a hard business case to make. Now it's a little bit easier. They've shipped I don't know the numbers, but probably a lot of CV1s and Vives, and so now it's easier to make a case to your boss and say, hey, let's do a VR game. And so I just wish it were something that I could have kind of rallied the troops a lot earlier.
I think it's a virtuous cycle thing. You get the headsets out there, you get the compute and the graphics up to par. People's creativity gets unleashed. VR has been around for probably arguably decades in some form or another. I think it's only recently where we've got the right talent, the tools, the CPU compute, the graphics compute, the platform in place, so that make that experience compelling enough that you actually want to go do it again versus go throw up. And sorry if some of you are car sick, you're always going to be car sick, but we're to the point now where 90 frames a second is actually a pretty enjoyable experience, and now we're looking for people's creativity to kind of get unleashed. Right? I'm going to see if the audience has any questions. Wow, people have questions. Oh yeah, you might have to line up the mic, sorry about that. I'll try to go here.
Hi, Randy Engel. Theresa said something during her part about avatars and the scanning, and I've actually been here for many of the IDFs and scanned my body in the Intel booth, and then
Scan your body.
And then wrote the hoverboards and all the other cool games. But I'm actually not that interested in being myself when I play a game. Matter of fact, I'm not interested in reality at all. I'd rather spend time in Dr. Seuss's brain or Tim Burton's brain than in anything that's real in the planet. I'd rather visit the planet than be in a virtual experience of that. So my question is, should we be doing real people with real names and being that kind of social, or should we be making up something that's different? So challenge you guys.
Since that was what you started.
That's such a great question. I think there's a couple of things. I think it will be great to give people the option to represent themselves as they physiologically appear with their corporeal body. But of course, you want to give people the opportunity for creativity and for fantasy and getting outside of that. I think we're going to hit some really interesting issues when it comes to social and the degree of anonymity. So, a lot of people, like if you're on Facebook right now, there are, many people will choose to use their face as a way to signal to other people who they are, but some people will choose to use a different creative picture, and that's really up to the user. And I think but also coming back to anonymity, I think that will be interesting as far as like players' treatment of each other, and I think avatar representation may play into that to some degree.
Yeah, I understand why that's kind of a fantasy of a lot of people, but at the same time, if you look kind of at modern social networks and what kind of became the mainstream platform for social online stuff, it's bringing in mostly reality and allowing people to share reality in an amplified level. And it wasn't MUDs or MMOs that won, which are the fantasy side of things. It was reality, but like amplified and more easily shared with people. So I think kind of from a mainstream perspective, having some sort of representation of yourself, even if it's idealized, is probably going to be a nice thing to have. I'm trying to remember from Brian Krasanis's keynote today, I think one of the things he was talking about was merged reality, where you scan your actual self into something, and then you can do things to that avatar based on. So in some cases, I think you might want it to look like you. Depends on what you're trying to do at the time. But I think that was the example today. Let me go to next question.
Yeah, hi. So my question kind of touches on the anonymity and player treatment of each other. Like yesterday, I was talking to my friend who is also working on social VR games. And he's a big proponent of how powerful that experience is. But he also mentioned that it opens up like a whole new form of super invasive cyberbullying. And how are we going to curb that? And like he's been testing things of just like covering people's eyes in the experience and just trying to give them a bad time and seeing how people deal with it. And I'm just wondering what your guys' take on the whole cyberbullying issue is for the future.
Well, I'm not a panelist, but I try to be one sometimes. So Intel's taken a pretty strong stand against bullying, right? We foster diversity, and we sincerely and strongly talk about bullying. It's just not appropriate in any circumstance. I think part of what is useful in this type of a community, I think the way you design your game can sponsor or not sponsor bullying. So you have to think about the storyline you're pitching out there. And then on top of it all of us talked about the social aspects of VR. People have to speak up and say what's on their mind and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. You have to come to other people's defense. Don't just let them suffer because you see bullying happen. It's as much as the gamer and the audience responsibility is the responsibility of the developers and the corporations. Anybody else have something you want to add on that?
Go ahead.
I just think we're on the cutting edge as far as technology, but we are on the cutting edge as far as social interaction as well. And so I think we're going to be figuring out, making mistakes and learning as we go.
Well, and I also think we're at a really interesting place where we are completely rewriting all the rules, and we're throwing away everything we did before, and we're trying to tackle problems in new ways. And I think this is one of those problems that we all have to, as an industry, be thoughtful of and be creative about, and come up with ways that make it a really rich and meaningful ecosystem for developers and for the people who are in the worlds that we build.
Bullying in the VR space is there's more to it than just regular bullying on the internet. Like for example, in virtual spaces, you can invade someone's personal space, and it feels very real in VR versus on the internet. It's usually just words. But we're facing the same challenges in VR as we do on the internet. I mean, having a code of conduct is great, but that's just words on a piece of paper. I mean, it means nothing if there's no one accountable you can go to and report issues, and they follow through with it. You need to have a system in place with procedures and things where if someone has a problem, it's investigated and dealt with properly. A lot of forums and communities online just don't have that, and that's a major problem online.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, good. Thanks.
There's a question from the Twitch stream for Anna specifically about business development. It seems like there's a lot of investment and upfront costs that developers are putting into VR right now, and sometimes it can kind of feel like being a loss leader just for the sake of getting on board with the new technology. What do you see as the path to a timeline, or when will VR games and VR in general start to become broadly profitable for developers?
Well, so I think we're at this really interesting and unique place in sort of the development of VR. We're at the beginning, and there's all these really interesting problems to solve. And so the people who are working in VR right now are the ones solving those initial problems, like those amazing first games that we all played growing up, whether that was Pong or Mario or whatever. Those classics that really defined genres and created experiences that had never been available before, those people are working in VR right now. And so I think developers who are there early are really at the cutting edge and are really going to be leaders in VR as it grows as an industry. As a platform, we're trying to make that as easy as possible for developers to jump in and really be early and take that risk. And as Keith said, there's not a huge market there yet, right? But it's going to be there, and you want to be early and you want to have those learnings. And so as a platform, Oculus is really trying to invest in developers and make it easier for them to take that leap and really be early and learn a lot and sort of help us solve, as a whole ecosystem, a lot of those early and interesting problems.
Yeah, on those business models, here's the good news about some of those business models and how to monetize. Gaming is not new. Entertainment is not new. There's a lot of key learnings you can take out of that. Whether it's free to play and buying in-game goodies around VR. I mean, there's a lot of key learnings you can apply into the VR space as well. Plus, I think there are new opportunities. I'm a fan of what the panel discussed, which I think there are opportunities around the social media aspects of this. And no surprise that you're seeing social media companies investing heavily in VR just because of that.
Well, and there's even just really basic things, right? Like UI, right? Like UI, we have to figure out how to do completely differently. It's just a whole new problem set, or input. Like, just everything about VR is new and different. And so to be there early, I think, is a rare opportunity to help sort of define that new medium.
Right, cool. Anyone else? Nope.
Thank you for the panel. My question sort of revolves around the future opportunities we were talking about a little bit with VR and sort of getting there first. Where do you see VR going in terms of like the integration with like brain-computer interfaces or like neuroscience technology to sort of bring that level of immersion up from where it currently sits?
Wow.
I make games, so.
I'll answer that. Like, I'm not a brain-computer interface expert by any means. I'm a little bit familiar with some of the existing platforms and hardware. I think, and Theresa brought this up earlier, where voice is very important in social, but I actually think speech recognition is important on the other side as an interface thing in VR. But ideally, you just get rid of the speech recognition and you'd have a low latency neural interface and you just think something while you're in VR and it happens. So, but I don't know when that's gonna happen or how far off it is. It could be sooner rather than later, but it would be interesting to see a major platform holder like integrate brain-computer interface, even if it's a EEG or something relatively simple. When you go down that path, you get into like a lot of weird things that are kind of science fiction-y and gross to people. So, but I think on the surface, there's definitely potential there.
As long as it stays on the outside, I don't want to have to jack into anything.
People don't want to drill holes.
None of this
in your brain
Matrix
and
stuff going on.
Have you read William Gibson? Come on. It's funny when you said neuroscience, I think doctor, so I'm not a doctor either, although I play doctor at home sometimes. The neuroscience piece was interesting, because I'm not sure where you were headed with that question. So let me test it a little bit. When you mention things like neuroscience, and I think about virtual reality, I'm thinking about like treatment of autism, right? Where you can have a well-bounded, repeatable experience to help people interact and connect more with the world around them by starting with virtual reality first. Or things like addressing phobias like agoraphobia or something like that. I think you can slowly start getting people used to those kind of concepts and start training them away from those things and how to deal with the real world by providing them an environment where it's a little bit safer, a little bit less caustic than real life, and then getting them there. So I don't know if that's what you meant, but I say VR has great reaches into medical and sort of the neuroscience kind of category.
I would just add that empathy in general, I think, is an incredibly powerful tool in VR. We've talked about social, but for instance, the team at Within, who's doing a lot of the 360 documentaries about different experiences people have, that's incredibly powerful. Like to be dropped down in the middle of a refugee camp and really actually feel like you're there and actually hear someone's stories and be able to connect to them. It's not an experience that you get when you watch that on the news. It's much more meaningful and you just feel much more connected to it. So I think empathy as a tool, whether that's in the way we tell stories in games or the way we see the world and other people's life experiences, I think it's just an incredibly powerful tool we have in VR.
That's the other social aspect. It's so easy to ignore something when it's at arm's distance. Yep. But the more you get to know something, the harder it is to ignore. And in a good way, it helps you make decisions about what you're going to go do about it. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Little deep, right on. Right? And we only got a few minutes. Sorry, we only have maybe one or two more questions we can ask.
Given your experiences, what's your best guess at a genre emerging out of VR that hasn't been seen before?
Well, I would say some of them, they're all kind of equal. Emerging, because I've seen experiments on almost everything. I've seen.
I think Giant
You're asking me.
one.
Yeah. Well, right. You're asking me to think about all the games made in like gaming's 40-year history, and it's like which genre hasn't been done before? It's like everything's been done already. But that's not true either, because the music games, the Rock Band, the Guitar Heroes and stuff, those came into existence in the past 15 years. So you don't know what's gonna happen. And if I had the answer to that question, I'd be working on that game right now. But Anna seems to think Giant Cop is one of those. So it's like, sure. I mean, it's.
Well, in some ways, it's a genre that's existed before, but you've never been able to play that genre like that.
That's
before.
true. That's very true.
It's a completely different way to have that experience.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
It's something you only do in VR.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. It's like how are you going to play that with a keyboard and mouse? I mean, you can't pick up things with the keyboard. Well, you can, but it's just not a very good experience. It takes it to the next level with VR.
Yeah, and I think Anna brought up a good point, and Giant Cop's a great example. But we're seeing a lot of games that are like they can still be considered a traditional genre, like a lot of the VR shooters, for example. And shooters is a very basic thing that's existed in games kind of since the beginning of games, right? But VR shooters are unique in the sense that they aren't quite like traditional first-person shooters from a control standpoint that you play with a mouse and keyboard. They aren't quite like light gun games either. They're kind of their own thing, but they're still very rooted in shooters. I'm really excited to see more narrative VR games, and I think there's a lot of interesting things. And I know people are working on stuff, and some things exist, but there's a lot of interesting things that can happen with character interaction and games that are almost like hybrid game improv or game theater experiences in narrative that you couldn't do in a traditional video game easily.
Again, anchoring more in the social kind of angle again you've been hearing.
And just to add to that, this is less of a genre, but it's more of a trend that I'm starting to see with VR, and I think it's going to take off, is you really have an opportunity to cherry pick your physics. And you can do that in other game experiences, but it's visceral in VR. So like with Keith's game, Giant Cop, he's playing with scale. And you know, there's a friend of mine who made an Audi showroom experience. It's not a game, but in order to deal with the constraint of having a car in a room scale VR that was 6x6, he gave the player, the user, motion gain, so every step was double the distance. So you can very you can just choose what kind of superpower you're going to give someone in VR and make a huge difference as long as you don't go overboard, because things can get really unintuitive really quickly.
Thank you.
We're getting close to the end. You might be the last one.
Okay. So my question is more about feedback that the player receives and the person using the tools that they have. Like a lot of the interactions that a person has right now is kind of just pulling the trigger to do everything. And I'm wondering if, I mean, from a front-facing like consumer, it seems like that's all it's going to be for like the next 3 years is like, I have a controller in my hand and I'm using it to move myself and I'm clicking a button. Or I'm going to be using like VR hands, like the RealSense to like be grabbing stuff. Do you think, and like Valve is opening up its tools to allow new like API, like I can make a sword out of the Valve controller or whatever. Do you think it'll ever evolve past that where like I can get like a feedback bar on my arm as like a pseudo shield or anything like that? Do you think that could happen, or would that be more like a third-party development thing that comes out?
That gets kind of dangerous, like the farther you get into it, because you know the more feedback, you know, the more real you can get, you can make your input devices. I mean, what if we create like a full body suit that like simulates you running into a wall if you run into a wall? You know, I mean, that causes actual pain to someone, and that's I wouldn't want to be on that team and have to hire the legal team for that.
From my point of view, there's a big reason why everything is triggered to select, and that is there's a variety of headsets right now, and there's a variety of input systems, and no developer right now can afford to invest really without funding into one of these tracks without hitting all of them. So you're trying to create an experience that's going to use the lowest common denominator of input that will be cross-platform, and right now that's a button click.
You know, I have kind of a strong opinion on this. Before I was working in the gaming kind of environment, I was also on the embedded side of things. And in embedded, there was lots of sensors we were dealing with. And there was one piece of work we were doing where we were embedding sensors into cloth. And what we wanted to do was actually track muscle activity and give feedback to the doctor or a training advisor about what's going on there. So I can absolutely see, we call it haptics, right? Sensors either in a vest that you wear or clothing that you wear or gloves that you wear as being part of that experience. And I can see it as part of things even beyond gaming. So all that they can make the gaming experience a lot more immersive. When you think about commercial applications of VR, now I can give athletes or weekend athletes feedback on their performance as they're performing in virtual reality, some game or soccer move or something like that, or golf swing, because I've got sensors on me and it can buzz where it wants me to accentuate, a certain amount of movement and things like that. I think the other thing that sensor networks kind of do in some clothing that you can wear is, again, people who are not able to physically get out can now have a physical experience, what running feels like, a wind is blowing or somebody's patting them on the back and, hey, good job, first person shooter, right? And they feel that pat on their back. I mean, they're still connected, right? And they, physically weren't able to get out of the house. I can see a lot of applications for this. So I'm actually very excited about what haptics can do inside of the context of VR. All right. Yeah, I need time to go spend. So I tell you what, we'll do one more since you've been waiting there so patiently. And then I am going to ask the panel one question that I did not tell you about. Right?
Oh no. Okay. So my question is, do you think that the Sony VR, PlayStation VR, is going to be good for VR, or do you think that it's not going to be good for VR? And
it's already good. I played with it.
Yeah, but sure. Like, there's a couple of great launch titles right now, but is the experience going to be burning for the consumer out there where they spend this $400 or $500 and there's maybe 10, 15 great games, but then there's going to be a lot of not so great games possibly. And, is the consumer going to forgive the VR experience, their first VR experience that they dumped all that money into?
I can tell you that it's probably going to be the most popular option coming out because it's certainly the most inexpensive and it's got the largest install base already because of the technology that it's built upon. I mean, how many PS4s are out there I mean, think about that, first of all. And then second of all, it's built on the technology, I think, behind the PS Move, which has been around for years already. So they're gonna hit that low price point. And you know, Sony and the people behind Sony's games and the people signed up to create content for Sony's platform, that's some pretty good talent there. So I think the amount of games that are going to be bad VR, I think by the time that PSVR is out there and in people's hands, and by the time the content is out there, I don't think there's probably going to be a whole lot of potential for bad VR to come out of that, especially since, you know, Oculus has been around for, you know, a couple of years, and Vive's been around, and there's a lot of examples they can pull from.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, I'm going to ask you my surprise. All right, did anybody want to jump in on that one before I ask you my question?
I can jump in.
Go ahead.
I think that the Sony, the PlayStation VR, has a really interesting design proposition where they can offer asymmetrical gameplay, because in a living room with your TV, you can have players on their gamepads or, you know, their controllers in a multiplayer local experience seeing something that's different than the person who is in VR. So I am not seeing that necessarily with any of the other headsets that are out there, which I'm pretty excited about. And I also think that there are self-publishing tools available in other platforms like the PC, where people can put out a lot of crap if they want to. So I'm not as worried about that for the console experience.
All right, cool. Anyone else? All right, here's my question. If you could ask Intel to do one thing, what would you ask us to do? And it can be stop something, start something, continue something, however you want to frame it, but what's
Free
that?
hardware.
Free hardware. Let me, hold on, I'm going to put free, and then I'm going to do that to it. But
Guys at work would have told me to say that.
But your point in free hardware is we have to have hardware that's affordable across a lot of price
Dev
points.
reach out, basically.
Okay,
Dev relations,
there you go.
Yeah. That's the politically correct way of saying give us free stuff.
Developer relations, yeah. Make sure the developers will get as much hardware in the hands as they can get, right?
Yeah.
That's
We're your biggest evangelist, really.
Absolutely, I'm a fan of that. I don't know if I can make that happen by myself, though.
I would say keep supporting developers. I mean, whether that's with hardware or whether that's with funding to help them take the jump into building for VR. I think the more we can enable developers to build amazing stuff and help us solve cool problems in VR, the better for the whole ecosystem.
Right, Scott?
My answer is going to be an answer that lots of game developers have said for a long time about Intel's integrated graphics and just better GPUs and better integrated graphics, right? And they've improved, you know, integrated graphics have improved over the years greatly, right?
Sweet.
But integrated graphics that support VR be great.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And we have a commitment to keep improving our graphics format. Matter of fact, I think Brian showed Skull Canyon with our integrated, Core i7 with integrated graphics did pretty stinking well, I thought. All right, Theresa, don't say graphics.
Oh no, uh-oh,
We're doing
then
it.
pass.
Oh my gosh.
No, I mean, always support with the hardware and the, you know, laptops that can run VR stuff would be great, and the, you know, Wi-Fi being faster so we can transmit wirelessly and not be tethered, all that cool stuff that the software people, content people on my side have nothing to do with.
Alrighty. So Keith, Anna, Scott, Theresa, thanks a ton for telling us what's on your mind. Let me ask you those questions. I appreciate it. And hey, thanks to the audience. Really good questions. Appreciate it.